Yeah, of course, and that's why I feel like it's very important when we deal with racism, for whether it from any ethnic minority group, whether it's like I said, Black, Asian, whether I should say Pan African, Asian, or Arab, is that um, whenever we deal with racism, I think it's very important that we deal with a systematic approach because like lived experience racism can differ. You could have grown up around white people your whole life, black people your whole life, and have never experienced racism. And that could be something that when you go through that, 1 minute, you could,
Mm.
so when you go through that as someone yourself, you've never experienced it. So I know a lot of people who come online and be like, my best friend's black or my best friend's white, my best friend's Asian. I've never had that. I went to an Asian school. I went to a white school, blah, blah, blah. And personally, they haven't experienced no racism. So sometimes they can play down the actual facts of what racism is. Or you might find a person who is black and says, well, the most racism I've ever faced was from Asians. Or you find an Asian person who says, well, the most racism I faced was growing up in South London, being the only Asian in a black school. I faced racism all day, and it wasn't from whites, it was from blacks. So again, that's a lived experience, and your truth is your truth. You went through that, yes, but that to some extent, that's levels of discrimination where people will discriminate, against you for many reasons. Your race, your height, you have like if you're wealthy, you're poor, like example, as a group of people, naturally speaking, from the hood in brackets, a lot of the time we'll discriminate against rich people. We'll say, what do rich people know about living like this? What do rich people know about life? And there is a lot of rich people who maybe do know about that because they came from poverty and made money. They weren't born with wealth. But we're going to discriminate on the basis of how we see rich people. So people get discriminated on many different levels. But when we talk about systematic racism, which affects you from the minute that you are born, that there are systems in a place that you live from the minute that you're born, your health care is affected, your welfare is affected. How likely is that that a black kid that is 10 years old, within a 5 year space of him being 10 to 15, so much changes for him in society, whether he's in Oxford or whether he's in London. It's irrelevant because the statistics that talk about how many times he's more likely to be stopped than his counterparts, how many more times he's likely to be arrested than his counterparts, how many more times he's likely to maybe face discrimination or racism with trying to find a job than his counterparts. This is irrelevant to whether you were called, a black so and so or an Asian so and so. Whether you never experienced that in your life, there are statistical facts that will tell you that there are going to be difficulties and challenges within your life, whether you face open racism or not. So a
Yeah.
lot of the time when we talk on,
Sorry, but just on that point, one of the really powerful stats that was given on that live was the fact that for every and I think that when you was listening to this as well, I remember you pausing that for every 100 offenders that are white that are put into high security prisons, 494 black
yeah,
people who commit the
putting
same offence are put into high security
offense,
prison. The same
high risk,
offence.
yes, the same offense. And these are the statistics that we're talking about. So we're saying you could be a black person, you could be, Michael from Oxford, who's grown up in a good environment, never faced racism, never had a problem before with the police or anything like that. But for some reason you commit an offense, or something happens in your life where you can commit an offense like you just mentioned, which is similar to any other white person within Oxford, but you have more than 3 times likely the chance of ending up in a high risk prison compared to your counterpart, and you don't know that life. Example, your offense might be that you went out on a Friday night, got drunk, got into a fight, punched someone, and got arrested for GBH, and then was sent to prison for GBH. And that same offense, GBH, that your white counterpart might also be arrested for and sent to prison for, you are more than 4 times like, or whatever the numbers are, likely to end up in a high risk prison than he is, and you're not even about that life. He might be more about that life than you. But these are the statistics that are institutional that affect you as a whole. So I feel like we're living in a time now where I get it. A lot of people want to talk about, you know, lived experiences, but I feel lived experiences cheat us out of the real systematic oppression that we're facing as ethnic minorities here in the UK. And it might be that the black community is in the spotlight now, and we find that every oppression has its time. You know, it's not this or that. Every oppression has its time in the spotlight, and we have to fight against it. But if you look at it as a whole, as ethnic minority groups, and you look at the stuff that's going on, you come to see that the systematic racism affects us and affects our children. You being Asian, you know, and having maybe an Asian family, children, there are statistics, you know, already against your children, whether they be in primary school or secondary school, that will affect them throughout their life. Whether you give them the best education or not, there are already statistics out here, institutional statistics, that will say, you know, an Asian person is more likely to this, an Asian person is more likely to that. And that's without anyone even yet to call them a racist name. And I feel
One
like
of
these are
the
things that, um,
Sorry, bro, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
yeah, so I feel like these are the things that we have to look at as a whole, as a community, because these things affect all of us. They affect my children, your children. So whether the fact that I grew up in Brixton, South London, and I was called racist names or not, yeah, it's problematic. But I might have been called these names and you might never have been called those names. But there's one thing that's definitely going to affect all of us, is the statistics that break down, you know, the challenges that we're going to face as a community and as a whole. And I feel like it's very important. And yes, we know, you know, one of the go-to points is that to talk about racism with Islam. And one of the biggest problems we find as a Muslim community is that the first thing that people throw out there is that there's no racism in Islam. But my thinking to that is that there's no listening to music in Islam, but we do it. There's no drinking alcohol in Islam, but Muslims do it. There's no clubbing in Islam, but Muslims do it. There's no, you know, boyfriends and girlfriends in Islam, but Muslims do it. So then why point out the fact that there's no racism in Islam as if that is a barrier to us facing racism? Muslims will be racist. That's just part and parcel of one of the things that are not allowed in Islam. But sadly, as a group of people, as Muslims, you know, with our own shortfalls, we're going to find racism. So that isn't a default setting to when you hear someone from the Asian community or the black community talk about racism. Our first thing shouldn't be there's no racism in Islam, there's no color in Islam, because half of the people that say that, you know, go clubbing, go raving, do all of those things, and that's not from Islam. So if we can do all of those things, why can't we be racist at the same time? You know what I'm trying to say? So I just feel like it's very important for us to understand people's differences and and other people's pains. And like a lot of the time me and Abu Bakr talk about, there's many things because of doing, you know, Roadside to Islam and coming up from that background, we dealt with youth from different backgrounds, Arab, you know, Asian, Caucasian, you name it, we dealt with those young people. And every young person had a problem which was specific to their background and where they came from and their culture. And some of the things we just couldn't talk about because we didn't understand it and we wouldn't do it justice. It's not befitting for me to come and talk about an issue, you know, pertaining to do with a white revert accepting Islam, coming from a racist family who then, you know, kind of, you know, kick him out his house, want nothing to do with him because the background of his family might be in brackets racist, and he has to go through that type of, you know, trial. And then I come online and I talk about, oh, white people, this white. I don't know that life because I haven't experienced that. The only person who can kind of give him an insight to that is maybe someone who is older, who is from the same community, who's experienced that and has experience in ways how to deal with it. But it isn't right for me to come and say, well, black people face difficulties as well. You might have been kicked out by your family, but I'm not allowed to go to the mosque. Or, you know, it's like, it's either, we're always trying to compare trials. Someone talks about their reality and their trial, we're quick to bring it down by saying, well, you know, I have issues as well, rather than just support, understand, listen. More time, all the things more time, the most important things that me and Abu Bakr used to do with Roadside to Islam is we used to just be a point to listen. Sometimes people just want to be heard. They want to be able to tell someone their difficulties, their trials, their tribulations without being judged, just being heard and just being another person on the other line to say, Subhanallah, may Allah make it easy for you, brother. Subhanallah, may Allah make it easy for you, sister. That's a difficult trial, no doubt. That's definitely difficult. Rather than be like, oh, don't worry, sister, when I was your age, this and this happened to me. It's like, it's belittling it. People, if someone doesn't get raped and then they tell you about their ordeal and you're like, don't worry about that. People have been raped for hundreds of years. You don't belittle it by bringing up something else that's worse. Like, you have to hear them out, understand them, and try to empathize and sympathize with the situation and try to get an understanding for our brothers and sisters. Because at the end of the day, as a group of people, especially as Muslims, we are brothers and sisters, and we need to have more empathy and more sympathy, because as a group, and another thing that I would say, as a group of people, like you mentioned, the police service and listening to those tapes and hearing racism, the reality is that every group within society, it just mirrors the overall society. If the society that we live in is racist, you're going to get racist doctors, racist, people in the fire brigade, in the police system, in the court system, because they're just going to mirror society. You're going to get racist footballers, people in sport. You're going to get racist imams, racist priests, because they mirror society. You know what I mean? And until we change the societal issue of institutional racism and having real respect for each other, which I think the new generation is prepared for, because we've never had more, intermixing or, communication. I feel like with smartphones, our communication level's gone, from 0 to 100, how we're able to communicate with people from all different walks of lives. And I feel like this communication is going to give us, it's going to give us a footing to have a better understanding of people's problems. And yes, people are still going to be racist, and yes, they're going to still be pockets, but it won't be on a societal level or on an institutional level where people let it slide. And I think we're seeing that with these marches, that people do want to affect policy, because none of these things are going to change unless the policies change that allow these things to continue.